Happy Monday, everybody. I'm reading some more of Marshfield Dreams to you guys today from the comfort of my backyard. All right, the next chapter that I'm going to read to you is called Eating the World. Here's the picture. Okay, it says the 5 oldest kids in summer. Jimmy didn't like following the rules, but Tommy took the rules and shredded them into little pieces. From the moment he could walk, he was the Tasmanian devil of the family, pulling books off shelves, whacking little kids, stealing toys. One time, he yelled during church. "Quiet," Mom told him. "The priest doesn't want to hear you." "I hate the priest," Tommy said loudly. With that, Mom grabbed his arm and rushed him out of the church. Whenever he got in trouble, Mom made him sit under the kitchen table so that she could keep an eye on him. This happened a lot. One morning, Tommy wandered away from our house and walked down Acorn Street. He was 4 years old and somehow got the crazy fool idea to start eating things. He munched dandelions, he gobbled grass, chewed sticks, swallowed dirt. Tommy pried and used some gum off the and pried some used gum off the street and chewed it. He found a discarded cigarette, broke it in half, and gobbled that down too. Pretty soon, Tommy staggered into the house, his face white as a piece of Wonder Bread. He was crying and holding his belly. When Mom found out what he'd been eating, she let out a yelp. She asked Lainey to watch the baby and keep an eye on the other kids. Then she put Tommy into the back seat of the car and drove straight to the hospital. I went with her. "What's going to happen to him?" I asked. "He might have to get his stomach pumped," Mom said. I could tell she was upset. She had the steering wheel in a stranglehold. "Really? How do they do that?" I pictured some kind of suction on the outside of his belly. "They take a skinny hose and stick it down your throat," Mom explained, using a low voice so Tommy couldn't overhear. "They vacuum up whatever's in your stomach. Believe me, it's not a pleasant experience." Ugh, I wanted to just throw up listening to that description. It turned out that Tommy didn't have to get his stomach pumped after all. The doctor gave him a special kind of medicine that made him vomit all the junk he'd eaten. I'd stayed in the waiting room, so I missed those fireworks. When Mom finally brought my brother out, he looked a lot better, even though he was crying. "You're lucky you didn't kill yourself," Mom said on the way home. I turned to look at Tommy, but he had already fallen asleep. Next day at breakfast, Jimmy asked him, "Why'd you do something dumb like that?" "I was hungry," Tommy replied. "Why didn't you eat some regular food?" Jimmy demanded. "I didn't have any," Tommy explained. "That was the stupidest excuse I've ever heard," Jimmy said, rolling his eyes. What Tommy did was stupid, but for a long time, the idea of it, trying to eat the world, stayed in my mind. Once, when I was alone in the woods, I pulled a leaf off a maple tree, folded it into my mouth, and started to chew. It was bitter. Later, I nibbled on a piece of pine bark and spit it out. I knelt down, peeled off the layer of the pine needles, and put my tongue against the bare ground. Dirt tasted different from what I had expected. It was almost clean, almost sweet. All right, the next chapter is called Summer Sunday Morning, and there's a picture of Tommy, Lainey, Ralph, and Bobby. Summer Sunday Morning. Saturday morning, I went to confession, and at night I took a bath. Mom filled the tub, and we filed in like the animals on Noah's Ark, 2 at a time so she could scrub us clean. All this was because of Sunday. Sunday meant clean ears and wool pants, white shirts and ties, jackets and dresses, and shiny shoes. Sunday meant church. I knew that going to confession and church was a way to cleanse my soul, and it was important to have a clean, sin-free soul if you hope to go to heaven. But church was important for another more practical reason. If we behaved at church, if one of us didn't poke out somebody's eye while we were driving home, Dad would stop at Leo's Bakery for a dozen donuts. And Leo's lemon-filled donuts were so delicious that people traveled from far away to buy them. But going to church in Marshfield got a lot more complicated in the summer. Tourists swelled our town from Memorial Day straight through Labor Day. Streets, stores, and churches were a lot more crowded. One morning, we showed up for the 9:30 mass to find our church packed, every seat taken. Jimmy groaned. I looked at Dad and Mom. What were we going to do? Go home and come back for the 11 o'clock mass early enough to get a proper seat? Not likely. What would we do at home for an hour and a half sitting around in our best clothes? Could we possibly keep them clean? I knew the bottom line. If you were there on time, it counted for your Sunday Mass obligation, even if you didn't actually get a seat in the church. There was no choice but to wait with other latecomers by the open door outside the church. So we stood, all 9 of us, outside the big church door. Dad slipped through the crowd and ducked inside. I knew he would whisper a few quiet words with the ushers and leave a small stack of quarters on one of the felt covered tables at the back of the church. I wished I could go in with him. It was hard to hear what the priest was saying. In fact, it was impossible to hear more than the sound of droning words, the occasional tinkle of bells on the altar, the rustle of people's best clothes as 200 people all stood, sat, or knelt. With no pews to corral them and no altar to focus their attention, my brothers and sisters showed no interest in what was going on inside. Outside the church, they had no fear of God. Jimmy and Elaine began a contest to see how long they could balance on one foot. Tommy was hard at work bothering some ants. Bobby and Johnny were ripping pretend farts by blowing into their hands, much to the delight of Joey the baby. Lemon donuts, I reminded my brother and sisters, but they ignored me. When Mom saw what the kids were doing, she fiercely snapped her finger and fired a stern look at them. She grabbed Tommy and Bobby and pulled them close to the church door. For the next 45 minutes, she kept doing that, rotating kids close to the open door of the church so we could each get our dose of the churchy sounds, smells, and action. Honestly, it seemed pretty pointless to me, standing there in our best clothes. I mean, the priest couldn't even see us. But when it became clear that we weren't going to leave, I realized that there was nothing to do but lean toward the open door, try to listen, breathe in the incense, breathe in the incense smell wafting out into the June morning. It was a perfect Marshfield morning, sunny and warm. The air had a salty tang that tasted like the ocean. At this time of day, it would be so beautiful at the beach. My wool pants were starting to itch, but I thought about Leo's bakery and tried to hang in there. I had Jesus on the inside, sweet summer outside, and the possibility of some heavenly donuts not too far down the road. The next chapter is called Last Kiss. This is one of my favorites. And there's a picture of Ralph's father. Mom and Dad always kissed us goodnight before we went to bed. Mom kissed my right cheek, Dad my left. After that, under the covers, and it was easy to glide to sleep. These kisses were a regular part of the bedtime routine, like brushing my teeth, having the nightly bowl of cereal, or hearing a story before lights out. It felt like having air to breathe, or a blanket to keep me warm. Automatic, and I never gave it a second thought. One night, I finished my bedtime bowl of cereal and went to Mom. Sleep tight, she murmured, kissing me on the cheek. Night, Mom. I found Dad sitting at the desk in his office. I'm going to bed, I told him. Well, good night. To my surprise, he reached out and shook my hand. At first, I just stood there, confused. Finally, I took his hand and shook it the way I'd seen men shake hands. Sleep tight, he said, and then he turned away from me and went back to his paperwork. Feeling more surprised than hurt, I headed off to bed. Next night, I gave it another shot. After eating my bowl of cereal, I went to Mom. She kissed me and gave me a big hug. That built up my courage before I went to my dad. I found him out on our driveway. He was packing the trunk in his car, getting ready to go on a business trip. Hey, he said, straightening up. Bedtime? Yeah, I moved toward him. Good night. He wrapped his arms around me and gave me a bear hug. Night. My voice was muffled against his. He released me and went back to packing the car. For a few seconds, I didn't move. The night was warm. Fireflies were out, floating on the evening breeze. They made me think of jellyfish Dad and I once saw one night about a year before when we were on the dock at the beach. I noticed lights flickering in the dark water and was amazed to find out that they were living animals. How can they light up like that? I had asked my dad. They make their own light, he explained, like fireflies. How do jellyfish move? I asked him. Do they have fins? No, Dad said. But what if they want to see their friends? I asked. How do they get there? They drift in the tide, Dad explained. If they're lucky, the tide will help them drift to where they want to go. What if they want to see their friends, but they're not lucky? I asked. He shrugged. Then I guess they drift away from each other. 2 more times, I went to Dad for a goodnight kiss. No luck. Finally, I gave up. Mom still kissed me goodnight on my right cheek, but somehow it didn't feel the same. Her kisses didn't have the safe, solid feeling they'd had before. I laid in my bed trying to figure it out. Even though I was confused, one thing seemed clear. My father and I had drifted away from each other in a small but important way, a way that I couldn't explain, not even to myself.